Thank you very much. So, I've been asked to do this talk before, and I had to do a lot of preparation to look at the health effects of unforgiveness. And a lot of people carry unforgiveness with them. And it's impacting your life, not only mentally, not only spiritually, but physically. So we've got to start. Where do I point it? Anyway? It's not working. Yeah, I think so. The light is working. So there's a warning. You can see that's not my head. My head is bald, but it doesn't have any tattoos. I'm getting a signal that I'm too loud. Turn the mic down, please. And the reason I'm under pressure is because we've got 8 weeks of program and we're squashing it into 1 hour. So we've got to keep moving. Forgiveness is the healing form of love. That's what forgiveness is. And we're going to try and squash all of this down. Right at the end, I will hand out a questionnaire, and you, in filling out the questionnaire, you will assess whether you have a forgiving personality or not. It's not me. It's been done by psychologists, the questionnaire. You fill it in honestly, and it will tell you something about your personality and your disposition to forgiveness. But let's go. Just try and stick with my accent. I know it's a funny accent at times. I have spoken here before about the connection between the brain and the heart. But now on this diagram, which is too crowded for me to even try to make sense of it in 30 seconds, you see the connection that is being postulated, because we don't know everything about the connection between your brain and your body, your mind and your body, your brain and your body. And the psychologists say that there are a number of different factors, biological, psychosocial, health behavior, that impact on your body. This year is mostly to do with your body. These are the interventions they think that they're going to help you. And of course, these are the stresses of life that impact on your health and your mind. And all these things here are your body, and this is what happens as a result. So mostly, these are hormones, adrenaline, low adrenaline, cortisol, and other hormones, and also immune mechanisms. All of these are implicated in inflammation. All of them are implicated in lowering your immune system and making you prone to disease and even to cancer. So several years ago, they sent out a questionnaire and they asked people whether they held grudges for several years. This is just one of the studies. There are numerous studies that have been done that look at the connection between unforgiveness and your health. I don't have time to go through any of them now, but basically that after they assessed the study, they found that the people who were holding on to unforgiveness were more likely to have heart disease, cardiac arrest, elevated blood pressure, stomach ulcers, arthritis, back problems, headaches, and chronic pain. So holding on to unforgiveness, or holding on to grudges, or holding on to hatred, or holding on to guilt, or holding on to anger does impact your health. And we're going to look at some of the things that it impacts. And at the end, I will be taking questions probably for about 5 minutes, because if I take any longer, you may ask me a question I don't know, and then I'll look I'll take questions at the end. So forgiveness is the key to unlocking the door, and you want to set someone else free, but it's actually yourself. Forgiveness is unlocking the door to set someone else free, but it's actually yourself. A conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward a person or a group who has harmed you. Now, Later on this afternoon, we'll talk about it from a theological viewpoint, but this is mostly from a health viewpoint. There is one slide here that I would love you to keep in your mind more than any other. I'll tell you when it comes up. It's coming up soon. But in my experience, in my going through things that have enlightened me, that have opened my own mind to forgiveness and anger and hurt and guilt and all that, this one slide is the most profound slide of all these slides that I'm going to show you. Forgiveness is a process. A lot of people think that forgiveness is a one-off thing. It's not. Forgiveness is a process, or the end point of a process that will bring you to where you actually forgive the person or the group or whatever has happened. And involves a change in emotion and attitude. How does it start? There's a transgression. There's a perception of the offense. There's hot emotions. And then here comes the real kicker when it comes to what happens with people. Rumination. Those of you that are veterinarians will know what rumination is. That's what the cows do. They ruminate. And then, of course, unforgiveness. I just want to go back. Okay, still coming. Bad things always happen in threes. You know that the unholy trinity of Revelation 13 is threes, and bad things always happen in threes. And the first one is hurt. The first one is hurt. The second is anger, and the third is guilt. And because I'm not a psychologist, I asked the psychologists what they thought about these three things, whether they agreed with what I was saying, and the psychologist agreed that bad things happen in threes, and these three are some of the strongest emotions that people have. Hurt. I've asked you not to criticize my weight, and now my tummy's feeling sad. And there comes the slide. And in my humble opinion, this is the most significant slide you're going to see today. Nobody can hurt you without your permission. We got to remember that every feeling that we experience comes from the mind. You know, when somebody says to me, "You talk funny," okay, I talk funny. I don't happen to be American, I don't happen to be English, I don't happen to be Australian. Or somebody says to me, "You got a big nose." So what? I was born like this. But the point I'm trying to get across is that in my experience, I've discovered that when we start allowing people to control our feelings, that's when it all starts. And anger, guilt, fear, all these bad emotions all start in our brain. When the first thought comes in your mind, you need to switch your thinking. And it will take a while to learn this. But you can control your thoughts. That's why the Bible says, make every thought captive to God. So the thought processes that are in your mind, not your brain. Remember, your brain only feels electrical currents. Those electrical currents trigger thoughts, and those thoughts trigger emotions, and those emotions trigger feelings, and those feelings trigger a reaction, and very often that reaction is, "Don't be stupid." Sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you. Or somebody's driving in front of you. "What an idiot, get out of the way, can't you see?" Usually, and it's usually a lady. I may cause a bit of trouble by doing that, but anyway. So nobody can hurt you without your permission. Doesn't matter who it is, your wife, your partner, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, who it is, they can't hurt you without your permission. Anger. Don't we all know it well? I only seem to have women faces there, but that's not being sexist. That's were the ones that I just found as I was doing this talk. So anger is the second one. And then guilt. Guilt is also a very, very powerful emotion. Guilt leads to a lot of depression. It leads to a lot of mental illness. Because we need to forgive ourselves. Forgiveness has got two arms. This is a real person, but he was using steroid oil to reach that result. That's not his muscles. So you've got to forgive others, and you've got to forgive yourself. Forgiveness has got two arms. So let's just quickly go through what happens when you hold grudges, what happens when there's unforgiveness. Cardiac, stress, elevated blood pressure. Elevated blood pressure has got ongoing effects. When your blood pressure goes up, it doesn't only affect your heart. Your heart has got to work harder. It affects your kidneys. It affects your eyes because the small blood vessels in your eyes are subjected to a higher pressure. It affects, it affects you in many ways. So blood pressure, the vessels in your brain. People have strokes as a result of blood pressure. So unforgiveness can lead to cardiac problems. Stomach problems. You increase the amount of acid that your stomach is producing, and that leads to ulcers. And ulcers, of course, can have numerous side effects. They can rupture, you can die, and you can live with chronic pain from a stomach ulcer that will lead you to be grumpy all the time. So these are all things that have flow-on effects. Your kidneys, we've already spoken about your kidneys. Your kidneys are under pressure, and they stop working properly because they cannot deal with the pressure, and then you start getting kidney failure, and that leads to problems, dialysis and other problems. And of course, muscular problems. Knots in the neck, you're always stressed out, your back, you've got back trouble, got back pain. Physical effects, there's many of them, and they affect you in many ways. Mental problems. Stress-related disease. As I was saying earlier, a single thought, when it's held in your mind, will lead to a downward spiral. And that spiral goes down, 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 down. You start off with anxiety. That anxiety can spiral down until you in depression. And then, of course, once you're depressed, that has got all the flow-on effects of depression. Now, it's not only those emotions that affect you. I mean, you've all seen or you've heard or it's been on the ABC, you are what you eat. They acknowledge now that your food also will affect your mental health, your mental state. So food affects you as well. It's not only these things. So it's a multifactorial thing. Where am I? Stress, mental issues. You've been abused as a child. I meet sufferers all the time. And so they repeat what they've been doing. They feel anger. They feel unforgiveness to the person who abused them. And they play that out in their own lives, and they abuse their own children. And then, of course, it's got ongoing effects. Domestic violence. We all know that we have an epidemic of domestic violence, it seems, in Australia. And the government is doing what they can to tackle it. But this all starts up here. All starts up here. Marital breakdown, fighting, domestic disputes. And alcoholism. So many people acknowledge to me at work, they're in jail because they drink, and they drink because they've got problems. And this can all be as a part of grudges and things that people hold on to. Now, I just want to quickly run through some of the myths that are associated with forgiveness, because a lot of people are unclear what forgiveness really is. Number one, forgiveness, pardon me, is a step one takes. Forgiveness is not a step, it's a process. You've got to move from where you are through a number of different steps to where you actually forgive. So it's not a step. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you must forget. And we don't have time to unpack that, but forgiving doesn't mean that you must forget. You know, there's that old saying, forgive and forget. Doesn't mean that you have to forget because you've forgiven somebody. Forgiveness means weakness. On the contrary, forgiveness doesn't mean weakness, it means strength. When you forgive somebody, you're actually condoning what they're doing. That's another myth about forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean condoning what people do. And forgiveness leads to reconciliation. Reconciliation is the step that comes after forgiveness. Reconciliation and forgiveness are not the same thing. They're separate. Forgiveness is a single person thing. I can forgive anybody by myself, but I may never be reconciled to that person because that person may still have grudges against me. Be that as it may, I can still forgive that person, whether they reconcile to me or not, and I can move on. Some more myths around forgiveness. Forgiveness is for the apologetic. Forgiveness is for those who ask. The person who did something that caused a problem may have passed away. So they may be dead. They may have moved overseas. They may have moved on. They may have moved to another city. And here you are holding on to this grudge or this hatred or this resentment or anger or whatever you're feeling. The person may never ask you for forgiveness. You still need to forgive them. Otherwise, you will be the one feeling the results of holding on to that. Forgiveness is for the deserving. No, it's not. Forgiveness is disloyal to the injured. A family member got hurt, got assaulted, and you're the one that's so angry. The family member may have moved on, but you still got that anger inside you. You still got that hatred, that resentment towards the person, and you're not being disloyal to the person who was injured, but you are learning to deal with your feelings which are impacting your health and your outlook on life, and you're moving on from the incident that led to the problem. And true forgiveness is always accepted. That's not true. You may go to the party, you may ask them for forgiveness because you may be the offender, but that person doesn't accept it. You've got to learn to forgive yourself. This is a big problem that people have, is that when they've done something themselves, they need to learn to forgive themselves. Often we hang on to those guilt feelings for years. The person that we injured, in inverted commas, may have passed away or may have forgiven you long ago, but you're still holding on to that guilt. And of course, as Christians, we realize that the devil loves you to feel guilty because he knows that very often leads to depression. And when you're depressed, you're not focusing on God, you're focusing on yourself, on your feelings, you can't get out of bed, you're lying in bed for days and weeks on end, and he's having the winning, he's laughing all the way to the bank. So forgiveness, pardon me, is not always necessarily accepted. You may have done everything you could to tell the person that you seek forgiveness, but that person may just be ignoring you. And of course, if that's happening, you're not going to get reconciliation either because that person doesn't want to be reconciled to you. So now let's quickly, some of the barriers to forgiveness. Number one, of course, being pride, ongoing abuse or injustice, no regret or remorse, no apology, and no restitution. Those are some of the barriers to forgiveness, and no acknowledgement. Some more barriers. I know I'm giving you a lot of things: overwhelming negative emotions, fear that the transgression will be repeated, assumption that one needs to forget. We saw that was a myth that came up earlier. The fear of appearing weak, and belief that justice will not be served by forgiveness. So those are some of the barriers. What forgiveness is? First and foremost, forgiveness is something you do for yourself. That's the first thing. Forgiveness is going to impact you first before it impacts somebody else. So it's what you do for yourself. And, pardon me, because forgiveness is a process, forgiveness takes time. You have to understand, starting right at the beginning, what caused the problem, and then work through a number of steps where you bring yourself to the point where you can close the incident off, and we'll see more about that as we go along. And forgiveness equals freedom. You don't carry that weight, that burden with you wherever you go. It's with you all the time. It's like a cancer. It's eating into your mind. It's eating into your soul. You don't carry that, so you've moved on. Forgiveness is a transformation. It's not forgetting. It's not pardoning. It can break old patterns, and forgiveness is not reconciliation. And thinking about forgiveness is not enough. So the big $64 million question is how? This is the easy way. Okay, this is put out by one of the psychologists who works in forgiveness. I think his name is Robert Enright. So you hold on, you recall the hurt. Sorry, it starts at the bottom. Recall the hurt. You empathize with the person who was involved. You decide that you're going to give the gift of forgiveness. You commit publicly to forgive, and you hold on to forgiveness. That's the easy way, the 5-step way. Here comes the hard way. If I can get my clicker to work. 10 steps. There's always an easy way and a hard way. You accept that life is not fair. It's not going to be fair. Life is never going to be fair. You're never going to have a golden spoon or a silver teaspoon in your mouth wherever you go. There's always going to be problems. So we need to accept that first of all. It forms the basis for everything else that goes on after that. Number 2, we stop blaming others for our circumstances. I said this was the hard way. It's so easy, isn't it? Oh, it's your fault. That's why I'm like this. Oh, it's your fault. That's why I'm in this problem. Oh, it's your fault. We've got to stop blaming other people for the way we feel. As I said earlier, people don't rule your emotions. You are the one who's in charge of your emotions. When somebody is ruling your emotions, that person is ruling you. And you are the weakling, and they are the one who's in a position of strength. But when you put that aside, then you'll stop blaming other people for your circumstances, and you'll stop running your emotions according to somebody else's agenda. And you will actually be the stronger party because you'll be in control of your emotions and you'll be in control of yourself. That's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? Understand we cannot change others, only ourselves. You know, we can be in a relationship, in a friendship, and that person doesn't want to change. That person may make a joke or think that they're funny when they're not, and you getting upset all the time. You are the one who's being injured, in inverted commas. Remember what Mohandas Gandhi said? Nobody can hurt you without your permission. But if you're the one that's being injured, that person... So you can't change other people. We look to change ourselves first, look to gain control of our own emotions first, of our own mental processes first. Pardon me. And when we change, others may change, even if we don't change. Acknowledge the hurt of some unpleasant act or event. That's true. Something has happened. And at the end, I've left the book here with the team. It's a PDF file. It's about 300 pages. But it's full of stories of people who have forgiven people who have done terrible things. And when I read it, I had tears in my eyes because it shows the strength that we have in us. And it's not only religious people, it's a-religious people. It's just true stories of people who were attacked, people who were assaulted, they were left half blind, they were left crippled, and they forgave their offender, and they moved on with their lives. And, they weren't in a cage all the time, holding on to what was happening. So you start off by acknowledging something has happened, and then, pardon me, then you've got to move on from that point. Reframe the hurt by changing the context. This slide comes from a psychologist from America, Dr. Dick Tibbett is his name. He works at the Florida Adventist Hospital, and he runs a program of 8 weeks on forgiveness, and very, very good material. But basically, I'll tell you a story. I met a young man, 18 years old, and at work, and I thought, what a monster. In fact, before I had met him, I thought, what a monster. He was the man who stabbed that young lady in Maji 27 times, killed her. I thought, what an absolute monster this guy is. I mean, 27 times, why would he do something like that? And then I met him in real life. He tried to escape and they shot him in his leg, so he was suffering. And when I met him, if you saw him in the street, you would bring him home. And he had a file that was about that thick. And as I read through his file, I realized what had happened in his childhood. He'd been abused. His father left the house when he was 8 years old. He'd been abused by his uncle. He had been homeless from about the age of 10, 11 years. He had had a terrible life. And when I saw the context, I reframed this young man. Then I suddenly empathized with the fact that he had had a terrible life. And I changed my opinion about him as a person. And so somebody may do something that you think is terrible, but when you look at the bigger picture, and we generally tend to focus on only what's happened, don't we? Oh, this is so bad. We focus on. But when we look at the bigger picture, then we can see that this person is not the bad person that we thought they were, perhaps, or there are circumstances in their life that would help us understand what they did, why they did it, and so on. Remember, don't know what happened there, but remember we make the choice to forgive. It's a choice, and it's a choice that we make. So we choose to empathize with the offender's life situation. I don't know where all those typos come from. It was working when I saw it this morning. Move from discontent to contentment. understand that forgiveness takes time, and take responsibility for our lives and our futures. So it's a process. It starts off and it comes to an end, and it's a choice that we are making. Now, I've got a quiz. As I said, we're going to hand out a quiz now that you will fill out. I'll keep the, just hold on, let me just have a look. I've got one there that's got all the, that's got the scoring on it. I think it's the first one. Yeah, okay, but there's one with 3 pages that's got the scoring on it, and I can't give that one.
I've already taken it out then.
Have you? Oh, well, pass it on to me. Yes. All right, so I'll take any questions. We're going to hand the quiz out now. You don't have to fill it out if you don't want to. You don't have to share with your friend, your partner, the person who's sitting next to you what your score is. And as I said, it was put out by the Heartland Institute. And I'll give you the scoring system at the end. No, it's not. It's not the scoring system. Not here. 3-page one.
Where would it be?
I don't know. It was on top.
Yeah, these are the ones that are on top.
No, there's others. Keep on handing out. Keep on handing out.
Can I have a comment and a question if I could?
Yeah, sure.
Quite a number of years ago, I have one here already.
Oh, you got one.
Someone very close to me was murdered. And
Yeah, sure.
I talked to some family members about forgiving this person who'd committed that crime. They got caught and were sentenced to 29 years in jail. I'm wondering, how do I get into the prison system to talk to that guy? Because I've forgiven him in my own heart. I've forgiven him for what he's done.
Okay.
And I've moved on. But I was wondering, what about him? He doesn't know.
Sure. So the question is in front from Kevin. A few years ago, somebody murdered a family member and got sentenced to 29 years, and he wants to know how he can contact that person. I don't know if that has happened to anybody else here, but there is a welfare officer in every correctional center, and the welfare officer will set up a meeting between you and the party, and then you can discuss the situation, and if that person wants to, of course. Because I know there is a person that I've had many discussions with. He was involved in drink driving, and he ran down the publican because the publican chucked him out because he was too drunk. And he killed the publican, and the publican's wife and he had a meeting. She forgave him, and he said I could use his story. I won't use his name, obviously. But he said that when she forgave him, that had a very big impact on his life. To know that this person has moved on and that this person has forgiven him. Now, I just need to, just give me a question. So if you finished, I don't know if you finished, pardon me, there is a bit of a twist in the scoring. You add up all the points when I tell you. And some of you may have tweaked to the fact that some of the questions seem a bit funny. So, is everybody finished? All right, we'll just wait a few more minutes. Yeah, no, he's done. So there are no right or wrong answers. I don't know if you read the directions at the top. Please be as open as possible. I'm not looking over your shoulder if you're telling porkies. There is an angel looking over your shoulder. No, only kidding. Radio. Now, there are a number of questions where the scoring is the reverse of what you've noted down. Okay, you with me? If you wrote a 2 for certain questions, the actual mark that you should add into your score is a 6. If you wrote a 1, the actual mark is a 7. If you wrote a 4, the actual mark, will be a 3. Will stay a 4. A 3 will be a 5. A 5 will be a 3. And a 6 will be a 2. Have I made myself totally confusing? Okay, I'll go through it again. There are some questions, I'm going to give you the question numbers in a minute. If you wrote down a 7, then in your score you put a 1. If you wrote a 1, in your score you put a 7. If you wrote a 2, in your score you put a 6. If you wrote a 6, in your score you put a 2. You switch around, okay? If you wrote a 4, it stays 4. If you wrote a 3, you give yourself a 5. But if you wrote a 5, you give yourself 3. Am I making more sense now?
What will be the score?
That you add up all the scores. Once I've given you those questions where you need to switch the score around, then you add the score, and then I will tell you what the scores mean. Okay? Are we ready?
Yep.
So everybody with me?
Yep.
If you wrote a 7, you give yourself a 1. You add 1 to your score. If you wrote a 1, you give yourself a 7 and add 7 to your score. On the following questions. Number 2. So for question 2, if you wrote a 7, you must add 1 into your score. But if you wrote a 1, you add 7 into your score. Question 2. Can I move on? Everybody with me? Question number 4. Question number 6. Going too fast? Question number 6. Question number 7. Question number 8. Number 9. Sorry. Oops. I said there was pressure on me, but it's question number 9, not number 8. I pull that back. Question number 9. Question number 11. Question number 13. Question number 15. And question number 17. All right, any questions about that? Now you add up your scores, and then you will get a score out of 126, and then we'll talk. So when you finish adding up your scores, then you'll end up with a total score. So that was question 2, question 4, question 6, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, and 17. You add them all up, and you'll end up with a total out of 126. If you got 2, you put 6 into your score, not 2. You swap it around. It's a mirror image. If you got 4, it stays the same. Any other questions? So question 2, question 4, question 6, question 7, question 9, question 11, 13, 15, and 17. You need to swap the initial score, the first score down, you need to mirror it. You with me?
Maybe we can just go through and just mention those numbers that have to be switched, and then we can confirm, we can help check those who may be
Okay.
confused.
All right, so we've got one helper. All right, question 2. Circle the ones where you need to swap the score around. Question, oh, there they are. Reverse scores. They're there on the screen. And then you add everything up, yes, and you end up with a score out of 126. Including the ones you've changed. You add the total score. And you can't end up with more than 126, because then you're cheating. Anybody else with questions?
We can help those who need more help later.
All right. All right, we've got to get moving, so I'm going to give you the results. Remember, I said you don't need to share your total score with anybody. It's for yourself. That's right. So, if your score is between 18 and 54, then you are usually an unforgiving person. Between 18 to 54, you have a low disposition to forgiveness or you're unforgiving. Between 55 to 89, you have a moderate forgiving personality. And of course, between 90 to 126, you are a forgiving type of person. So you can see there, I didn't even know I had this. The guys are changing it for me. You can see and you saw the source where that questionnaire came from, okay? So if you want to validate the questionnaire, there's a long article about it and the research behind it and so on. It's not something I sucked out of my thumb. And don't shoot me, I'm just a messenger. But that's what the psychiatrists and psychologists have worked out. What's that? Go to the score.
So can they cross out the ones that they originally put in for those reverse ones?
That's right, they can cross it out, yes, because that's not valid. All right. Kevin, you want to take over?
I will just wrap up and come back in half
Okay.
an hour.
Can I just ask you to please, when you go out, please hand in your pencil because I need to use it again in a future, at a future time. Thank you.